returning from occupation. The road to freedom that Russia turned into hell.
Just bullied. The child got sick 2 nights sleeping in the car.
There were 27 checkpoints.
Ukrainians were beaten, humiliated, they were threatened with death.
They told us to completely undress, to take everything off.
But thousands of people fled from the Kremlin regime despite all the obstacles.
I can't overstep myself, swear an oath to them there.
Now, the Russians have blocked all checkpoints into Kiev-controlled territory. But people continue to leave from Ukraine temporarily occupied to free Ukraine. Why do they have to travel thousands of kilometers and make a huge detour through several countries? Why does Putin turn the captured territories into a huge prison? And how to get out of it? Watch the special report, The Way Home. How Russia prevents Ukrainians from leaving the occupation. March 2022. Russian troops are bombing Mariupol. Tens of thousands of civilians are hiding in basements and in the shelters of the Azovstal plant. The Ukrainian government is trying to negotiate a green corridor with Russia to get citizens out of the war-torn city, but the occupiers are preventing the evacuation, continuing shelling. They're cutting off communications. Thousands of people, driven to despair, decide to leave on their own. Maria Vdovichenko was among them. She was 17 years old at the time. With her parents and sister, she was traveling from Mariupol to Zaporizhia. On the way there, they had to pass a filtration camp and 27 Russian checkpoints.
And we were searched at every checkpoint. Many times they picked on my dad. Why wasn't he serving? They said directly that he should have stayed at that checkpoint with them.
When a man tried to take his family out of the occupation, the Russians got furious.
They started beating him, pulling at his clothes, giving him backslaps, specifically hitting him, kicking him with their feet, pointing weapons at him, hitting him with those weapons.
Remembering all these horrors, Maria still says her family was still lucky. After all, after several days of hell, they managed to get to the Ukraine-controlled territory. But many people did not pass the checkpoints. They were detained. And nothing is still known about the fate of these Ukrainians. Thousands of people in the early spring of 2022, still in Mariupol, were unable to leave the city because of Russian shelling. Anna Zaitseva and her 4-month-old son hid from the bombing in the basements of the Azovstal plant. She spent 2 months there.
Everyone who will see this video, for them to help us make this green corridor, to get us out of here.
The whole of March and April, every day people heard shells exploding over their heads. It was only in early May that they started to get out of the plant through the hole that had been created by the bombing. The Ukrainian military guided them to the buses.
We boarded a bus that was completely broken. No doors, no windows.
The vehicle went in the direction of Zaporizhia, but on the way it was stopped. People changed for other buses. There were Russian soldiers there.
And we did not even think about any filtration process. So shocked. We thought we were going straight to Ukraine.
People were taken to tents. They were interrogated and searched.
They were told to undress completely, to take off everything. They were searched completely, and they looked at tattoos, they looked at scars.
Anna and her infant child were kept in the camp for 2 days.
They photographed us face and profile, as if you had come to prison.
Only after that did the buses with Mariupol residents go to Zaporizhia. Here, people finally felt free again. Many were provided with temporary housing. Refugees remembered Russian checkpoints and filtration as a nightmare. This woman, a mother of 5 children, says that the Russians did not have an ounce of sympathy for her. Only hatred towards her for having decided to leave the occupation.
They just mocked us. Simply, I had a sick child and 2 nights in the car. What kind of people are they?
Enerhodar, Zaporizhia region. In the first days of the invasion, thousands of its residents protested against the occupation. They came out to meet Russian troops with Ukrainian flags. They blocked the road to the nuclear plant for enemy armored vehicles. Russian soldiers responded by shooting at civilians. Russian troops occupied Enerhodar. Many citizens decided to leave for Kiev-controlled territory. Irina is one of them. We are not showing her face because her relatives are still in the city.
I didn't want to live under occupation. It was very difficult. It was very hard to see their faces every day as they walked around with machine guns. It was very hard.
Irina took her elderly mother with her. She is 87 years old. She has several chronic diseases. And in occupied Enerhodar, the situation with medicine is deplorable.
They didn't bring any medicine at all. When you went to the hospital, they immediately said, "What is the point of hospitalization?"
Irina took the documents and the most necessary things. She got into the car and drove with her mother towards Zaporizhia. But in order to get there, they had to pass through Russian checkpoints and filtration in the town of Vasilivka. Huge queues of cars, people who were waiting next to the cars day and night, sleeping on concrete, huddling in tents. When Irina arrived in Vasilivka, she was shocked.
We were the 415th in line. We signed up. And they let 50 cars pass a day, no more.
I asked the Russian military to let me through without waiting in line because there was a sick elderly woman in the car.
No, stay in line. We don't care. You're in line, so stay there.
They had to stand in line for 9 days. Unsanitary. And unbearable 30-degree heat.
And this is a bare field. We ourselves felt bad. My mom felt so bad. It was impossible to provide first aid there.
Lots of people at this checkpoint felt ill. At least 10 people died, unable to endure such conditions. These are just the cases of which the Ukrainian authorities have become aware. The occupiers also shot columns of vehicles that had already left Vasilivka, and they did it several times. Often, the Russians simply closed the checkpoint in Vasilivka for a few days. Or they stopped letting all the men through. It is men who have the hardest time getting out of the occupation. They were thoroughly searched, stripped naked. Their tattoos were looked at. And without exception, the Russians took away all the phones and laptops for checking. Irina says she knew about this and prepared herself. She deleted all the photos with Ukrainian flags and cleaned up social media. I saw how people who had not done so were turned back around.
There were girls there. They had Ukrainian flags. There were claims against them. If they find Ukrainian flags there or any correspondence, they may not let you through.
Many cars were empty. Their owners were taken away to an unknown destination, Irina recalls. She managed to pass the checkpoint.
When we arrived in Zaporizhia, we had tears in our eyes. We were just crying with happiness, crying that we had gotten out.
At the end of 2022, the Russians closed the checkpoint in Vasilivka. Since then, it has become even more difficult to leave the occupation. It is impossible to get directly into Kiev-controlled territory. You have to go through Russia. The shortest route to the border with Russia is through the so-called DPR. But there are many checkpoints there. They are constantly changing their location. It is impossible to guess where these checkpoints will be. People are forced not to use their own transport, but to pay carriers. They have a license that allows them to travel through the occupied territory. Carriers take money, but they do not give any guarantee that they will bring you to Russia. There is a danger of not passing through a checkpoint.
There are cases when they are held for a long time. There are cases when they are not allowed through, and there are cases when they are both not allowed through, and they do not come back. That is, they can be stopped there for additional filtration.
Young men barely pass through nowadays. There have been cases where people have gone missing, and it's terrible. People disappear and we know nothing about them.
To pass through the territory of the self-proclaimed DPR is only the beginning of the road. Further on, to get into Russia, you have to pass through the Novoazovsk and Veselo-Voznesenka checkpoints on the Ukrainian-Russian border. Here, Ukrainians are also forced to go through filtration, interrogations, checking gadgets. FSB officers look at contact lists on their phones, photos, social networks. People, they know about it and prepare ahead of time. Delete all images with the Ukrainian flag. All pro-Ukrainian channels in YouTube, in Telegram. But if a person has aroused suspicion, the Russians will try to restore the deleted data.
They take your phone from you without any alternative, connect it with USB. You sit and wait until they find the deleted photos. They can check social networks.
This applies primarily to the Telegram Messenger. All the photos, videos that you watched in any Telegram channel, the messenger itself saves, and even after clearing the cache, somehow in Telegram special services can see it. Elderly people are allowed through the Russian-Ukrainian border more quickly. But for everyone else, passing through the Veselo-Voznesenka checkpoint turns into a lottery. If they are unlucky, they can be held here for a very long time. Volunteers tell, for example, about a young married couple who were stuck in the filtration room at this checkpoint from morning till midnight.
They checked their documents, asked questions, and especially at the beginning of the night, they let you out on the territory of the Russian Federation when you have no public transportation, when not even a cab will come to you. They do it for fun.
Ukrainians are also trying to enter Russian territory through Crimea. However, even on the peninsula, they have to pass through filtration. It was easier for Yaroslav. He is a Crimean. That means that he was already on the occupied peninsula. He decided to leave after the full-scale invasion. After the events of 2022, I thought, well, that's it. There is no point in delaying. It is time to go. I wanted to be on the adequate side. I realized that the Russian Federation is not right here. Yaroslav entered Russia through the Crimean Bridge, and then he made his way through the territory of the Russian Federation to the only checkpoint that operated between Ukraine and Russia, Kolotylovka-Pokrovka. But there, people had to go through interrogation and filtration. Yaroslav aroused the suspicions of the security services.
I deleted everything I could on my phone, and he didn't like it. He said, "Come on, admit it to us, or the operatives will be here right away." Some 2 people arrived. The first one came in, and immediately they slapped me in the face. And then they asked questions. They didn't like my answer. They didn't believe me. Again, they slapped me, backslapped me. And so for a long, long time, and for 5 hours, they were doing this in turn. Now we'll give you to the Chechens, they'll take you to a brick factory and no one will find you. So there was a lot of other nonsense.
But Yaroslav kept repeating the same reason why he was going to Ukraine.
To look for my grandfather, maybe to study. And a woman came out, asked me where I was going to. I repeated. She said, "I'm so sick of your fairy tales."
However, after 5 hours of interrogation, Yaroslav was allowed through. Further, he had to walk 2 kilometers along the neutral strip, and he found himself on the territory of Ukraine, in the Sumy region. Refugees who pass through the Kolotylovka checkpoint are received by this volunteer center. People are helped with housing, work, and documents. They left their home. They traveled thousands of kilometers through a foreign country hostile to them to be back in their homeland, free and unconquered Ukraine. All these people do not want to live in occupation.
I can't get over myself to take their oath there.
But many still have relatives in the occupation. For security reasons, this woman has asked not to show her face. She says she hopes to take all her relatives from her town, which has been captured by the Russians. But she and her family could no longer live there.
The child does not want to go to school. The children do not like it. Everything is in Russian. They are used to Ukrainian. My husband said we were to leave.
The Russian world was imposed on all of them by force, but people escaped from it. And now everything associated with Russia disgusts them, including rubles.
They tear, crumple, throw them. Not out of love.
There were so many such cases that the volunteers decided to set aside a separate room for torn rubles. It is now called a Museum of Disdain for the occupiers. The flow of Ukrainians who crossed the checkpoint Kolotylovka was increasing. On average, there were 150 people per day. But in August last year, the Russians closed this checkpoint. There are no more checkpoints between Ukraine and Russia. Now, people have to travel from the occupied territories through Russia and then through Belarus to enter Ukraine through the Mokreny checkpoint. The distance has increased. The road has become even longer and more expensive. Alexei Yefremov traveled this way. He left Crimea, Moscow, St. Petersburg, by train to Brest in Belarus, and through the checkpoint Mokreny, got to Ukraine. He says he couldn't stay on the occupied peninsula any longer. Because of his anti-war position, he was threatened with a prison sentence.
I received one fine for discrediting the armed forces, and the next one was a criminal charge. So I knew that literally a little time would pass and I would be arrested. Well, besides, I already received these summonses, which I ignored completely.
Russia is carrying out mobilization in the occupied territories. People are being forced to take Russian passports. Repressions are on the rise.
Torture for pro-Ukrainian position, for the Ukrainian language, for likes on social networks, for subscriptions, for being reported. You can wake up with an automatic rifle at your temple because you were spotted with the inscription, "Glory to Ukraine," back in 2021. A man can be kidnapped. A Ukrainian passport can be torn in front of him. So many people are out of touch. And what we know is just the tip of the iceberg.
Irina and her daughter have traveled thousands of kilometers, past many checkpoints, just to get out of the occupation, and not to see any more Russian soldiers.
They could come in the morning. You were asleep in bed. They would come in with machine guns. A lot of people have moved into the houses, a lot of them. They just shoot the ceilings and windows with machine guns. Such a mess. The attitude is disgusting. Disgusting to people.
Neighborhoods occupied by the Kremlin are increasingly turning into a lawless zone.
Up to and including slavery. Recently, we helped a woman to leave. After the Kakhovka HPP was blown up, she was taken to a village where she worked in greenhouses without any rest. Just for food, for water, she worked. She had no communication, she could not leave the village. She had no documents. We know about the facts of slavery in the occupied territories. We are witnessing the utter horror. What is happening there? And this is just a small drop in the ocean. People are very afraid.
Many people are not allowed out of the occupation, and only by a miracle they manage to get out of there. Stepan thanks fate that he can be with his mother and relatives again on the territory of Ukraine, free from Putin's oppression. He is in Kherson. He remembers the year 2022. The Russians took over the city and ran into civilian protests. In response, the occupiers began shooting.
They are shooting. Russians are shooting.
And detention en masse. Stepan was detained as well. Russians tortured him.
Every day they electrocuted me. They beat me with baseball bats, on the leg, on the back. Rubber police truncheons were also used. My whole back was red. There was blood on the face. They were hitting with rifle guns. They knocked me down.
Then Stepan was taken to the left bank of the Dnipro. He spent 2 years there. He was forced to take a Russian passport. Then there was a summons to the military enlistment center.
They told me at once, either you'll be conscripted or sign a contract. The contract was offered, you will receive 200,000, you will be paid up to $1 million. I didn't fall for all these provocations.
He says he tried to leave the occupied territory, but he was turned back.
I tried twice, but they wouldn't let me out. When I tried to leave the first time, I was marked as not to be released, and they drew up a protocol that I was not allowed to leave the territory.
Stepan's mother, who was in Kherson, appealed for help to the Ukrainian authorities, and they organized an operation to rescue the man. The Ukrainian Navy's Special Intelligence Unit, Angels, was involved.
Thanks to the guys, the Angels, who took me out, who helped. The road was very hard, but I overcame it to be with my loved ones, and I couldn't believe I was finally home. There's no more pressure. I feel free. I'm home.
Details of the successful operation are being withheld by authorities.
We can't tell you how exactly we got him out, how physically it happened. A lot of people are in temporarily occupied territory, and if we disclose how we take people out, that information will get to the enemy. That channel will be closed.
Ukrainian special units helped many people who were not allowed out by the Russians to leave the occupation. There have been cases of Ukrainians fleeing from Russian-occupied territories on their own. Like Lydia Lomakovska, who literally walked across the front line from Ocheritin, Donetsk region, which was captured by Putin's soldiers. She walked 10 kilometers, leaning on a stick and a piece of board.
They were shooting. And I didn't understand where they were shooting. Or did they see me and started shooting at me? I didn't know. I heard a gunshot. Oh, God forbid. And I was walking and I thought, if they shoot, let them shoot. If they kill me, then they kill me.
And this footage has spread all over the world. A woman came out of occupied Oleshki in the Kherson region, walked across the destroyed Andriivsky Bridge, and waved with her Ukrainian passport in the direction of a Ukrainian drone. So, she got free. But such cases are an exception, not the rule. Getting past Russian soldiers is very difficult and incredibly dangerous. Russian troops mine the area, and they can start shooting at civilians who try to cross the front line. Russia has turned the occupied territories into a prison, and it is becoming increasingly difficult to get out of there.
They have actually closed the exit from the occupied territories so that people, the population, do not escape. The population actually performs a service function for them. Because there will be no drivers, there will be no salesmen, everyone will simply leave. All the people who do not want to live in the occupation. And there will be officials and law enforcers left, and that's it.
The occupiers are also holding people back with the help of fear. Pro-Ukrainian activists are afraid that when they try to leave, they will be detained and criminal cases will be fabricated against them.
These people can't leave the area. They are pro-Ukrainian. They could have been on the news, they are in the databases. And when they go to the first checkpoint, they can be detained there. Recently, there was the 3rd anniversary of large pro-Ukrainian rallies in the occupation, and all these people who were seen by the FSB, they are afraid to leave. They fear that for their pro-Ukrainian stance, they will be tortured, sent to the basement, forced to betray other pro-Ukrainian people.
Families are afraid that they will be separated during filtration. After all, there have also been such cases. People who managed to escape the occupation saw them with their own eyes.
When we were at the checkpoint, they were checking the neighboring car. They forced a man to leave his family and stay with them. And I understood that the woman, probably his wife, sat behind the wheel and they drove on. So there were even moments like that. They were separating families based on their some kind of beliefs. They were separating people.
And elderly people are afraid of the road itself. They may not be able to handle it.
There are many sick elderly people. It is very hard for them, because it takes at least 4 days to go around Belarus to Ukraine. If before, for example, you had to travel from occupied Novokakhovka to Kherson, 60 kilometers, now you have to travel several thousands of kilometers.
Well, and many younger people are afraid that they will be mobilized when they try to leave.
This is also the answer to the question of why people don't leave. Because of fear.
Russia is deliberately restricting freedom of movement in the occupied territories, and by doing so is violating the UN Charter and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. But Kremlin propaganda is trying to show a rosy picture of how good it has become to live on the lands seized by the Russian Federation. However, the truth is quite different.
The attitude is disgusting to people.
No medicine at all.
Every day, I was electrocuted. They also beat people with truncheons. People who are breaking out of the occupation break Putin's false propaganda, telling the truth. Russia is bringing suffering and devastation to the occupied Ukrainian lands. Occupied towns and villages are increasingly becoming a zone of lawlessness. People are killed, kidnapped, forced to work for free. They are being forced into the Russian army to be used as cannon fodder in the war. All this is done on orders from the Kremlin. Exit from the occupation is systematically complicated. After all, Putin needs not only land, but also people. He wants to use them as a resource for mobilization and cheap labor. Therefore, the dictator will continue to turn the occupied territories into one big prison. But to get out of it, though very difficult, is real, and thousands of people have already shown it by their own example. Maxim Urlapov, Special Report.